Hey the rulers, DMO73 here, bringing you our feature match showdown for the last ABC ruler, Garmheld, using Crossing Point, versus Paul trying out Welser with some of the new tools. Let's go ahead and jump right in. Ruler School is brought to you by Odyssey Games, where you can go to pre-order upcoming Force of Will sets, ccgprime.com for singles and supplies, cardodoko.com for those rulers in the international market looking for product, and to our guest lecturer members, Vite Ramen. Class is in session. So as we get into it here, just as a reminder, you can get your pre-orders for the next set, the Masterpiece, coming out right around the corner through Odyssey Games or Cardodoko or CCG Prime. And for those of you who are a little bit uninitiated to what exactly Garmheld and Crossing Point do together. So Crossing Point is the new XR. You have to have exactly 50 cards in your deck. You have to have 20 different chants of different names, and you can't have a human J-Ruler. Garmheld is not a human. In fact, he specifically requires us to have only zombies. So because he generates a bunch of tokens, Crossing Point works well here. He also mills himself, which plays into Crossing Point as well. Crossing Point wants you to have a bunch of expelled chance to give your board +5/+5, as well as the ability to draw an extra card a turn, which helps filter through, again, that 50 card starting deck. And also, Garmheld can reanimate zombies, which is really nice. So we also have that backup God's Art sitting there with Crossing Point, which we'll talk about if it comes up. Paul going first here with the reworked Welser, hits a Crown Stone on the top. We're going to stack some triggers with Garmheld moving the top two cards, milling top two, and then Crossing Point expelling a chant from our graveyard, setting ourselves up for what those God's Arts could be. Mikage Seijiro's Game of Dreams. You get to play some pretty cool chants when you have to play 20. Hitting a Killing Stone is our first stone, so paying our 3. Ultimately, we're going to move to end of turn. Garmheld's going to get his R turn trigger, which is going to be to put a zombie, specifically a Demonic Dead, into the field as well, or Niflheim. We hit Demonic Dead. Crossing Point's then going to expel the Heavenly Gust there. Down comes Robometa at the end of our turn from Paul, so putting some pressure down here with an Eternal Body. Hits a Knowledge Stone on turn 2. One more turn before that starts getting to be any color he wants. We do have a nice little blocker here, but thanks to the free Demonic Dead while leaving up a Will. We also still have the coin, which is for darkness. So we'll see how that plays into it here. Paul chooses to swing in for 4. We'll throw Demonic Dead under the bus. He is serving his purpose. Paul going to go ahead, see what he does here. We're going to see a Sword of Progression, which will trigger Welser as it reworks on his turn. He gets to recover as long as he plays. Though technically here, Sword of Progression is a contract chant, so that's a little bit of a misplay on our part. It would not actually recover a stone. Guardian Dragon gets to come in here, get him a new stone. So don't forget, specifically Welser requires you to play a non-contract spell, so a little bit of an error on our part, but still gets to play that Guardian Dragon, gets it play out there. We're going to mill another 2 cards, hitting another Demonic Dead and another spell for our Crossing Point to expel. We're going to throw down our own Sword of Progression here to draw. We need as much interaction as we can. We're a heavy green-black deck. Sword of Progression's a good way to get there. We have access to God's Art now because we have a Moon Source. This is very relevant. That Guardian Dragon is a little scary, though. This deck does not have much flying. So we're going to go ahead and burn our coin for black and Killing Stone for green to play Knight of the Legendary Vampire. We have 2 stones. We can target 2 stones worth of stuff. So we can get that Guardian Dragon off the board. Also helps us because it mills a couple more cards to the graveyard, setting ourselves up for Crossing Point. End of the turn, we're going to go ahead and get Demonic Dead back to be able to block the Robometa, which is great. We'll expel another chant, there being Crossing Point. So we're halfway to getting that board buff. +5/+5 to everything, as well as getting able to draw 2 cards a turn, which is potentially pretty huge. Paul playing down Kriya from the newest set. That does count as a chant when cast, and it's not a contract, so it will recover a stone for Welser, which is awesome. Not a lot of great hits there, unfortunately. Does just have to hit the Killua Fossil Girl in the city. Could come into play because Garmheld does use a couple of really good additions, as well as, automatic triggers for things like Sigurd, if we can get it reanimated. And we do get that Overgrowth, so everyone's got a little bit extra power. Not that it matters. You see we have a couple of cards in the Expel because Garmheld doesn't lock our sideboard to being zombies, but so we can still get access to Shiva and Fire Pit Trap if necessary. Robometa is going to come in for 5. Once again, throwing Demonic Dead under the bus. He'll just get reanimated at the end of our turn. We are not trying to aggro out here, so we're not terribly too concerned. We do see a mill and then an expel, and then still at the end of his turn, we're going to use the Evil Dead ability of Garmheld. We're going to target Zombie Revengers to try to cast it without playing its cost, and then we lose an extra 6 life. It's the cost of the card plus 3. So we're just going to see if the Activate ability resolves. It works. I lose my 6 life. Zombie Revengers is now going to attempt to be cast. That is going to succeed in being cast. Now we go to the automatic ability, see if we can get some value off of it. We do, which is great. We get a discard and a sacrifice of the Kriya. A little bit interesting that he didn't use the Fossil Girl to just cancel it, but I got a Fossil Girl out of his hand anyway, so a little bit of a strange decision there. Zombie Revengers here being able to swing in for some big damage, but also serving as a nice blocker for the Meta if we need to. Interdimensional Graveyard working out pretty nicely here. We're going to start ripping stuff out of the graveyard and making more tokens. It is a Grave edition now with the ABC, so it can be grabbed off of Sigurd, which is huge. Niflheim's gonna, or Demonic Dead is gonna get to come back in here. We make a token with Interdimensional Graveyard and we just pass the turn. So you can see, sets up some pretty nice boards here for a +5/+5. Our good friend Meta is going to be getting bigger here. Paul decides to go all the way up to the 15/15 before recovery. Right now it's sitting at 16 actually because of the +1/+1 counter, so not super great for us. It is a 2-turn clock at this point. Deciding what card he wants to tuck back. Looks like a Replicant Shiva is going to try to come in here. Getting solarized. Going to see Replicant Shiva come down. Thankfully, where we said before, we have our sort of progression to try to interact here, hoping that Paul doesn't have very much cancels here. He is a green control deck, so there's a very real likelihood that this just isn't going to get to resolve. But we're going to see, and we got lucky. So Rogue Shiva, Replicant Shiva not able to wipe out the board here. Meta is going to get to swing in for 16. We're going to accept that damage. Paul playing another cool card that got reworked in the ABC decks, but works really well with Welser. So it's a Sacred Burial. It doesn't get to draw a card anymore, but Welser will recover a stone when it's cast, if it's your first chance. And then Sacred Burial puts in a stone into play recovered. So it's essentially a mana neutral card that recycles, which is very cool for Welser. It just doesn't draw you a card, as it did before. Interdimensional Graveyard is going to target his Kriya, make us another token. Stacking some triggers in a certain particular way. Garmheld's going to resolve first. We see Neo Ragnarok, which is exactly the kind of card we want to see off of Crossing Point. Then Interdimensional Graveyard's going to rip, and Crossing Point's going to expel that Neo Ragnarok. You'll see me generate the token here in a second. I catch that I should have that token on field. So the thing about Crossing Point is its God's Art is 1 Void and 1 Moon, and it targets a chant that was expelled by Crossing Point and puts a copy of it on the chase. It plays a copy of it on the chase. So we'll talk more about that in the deck profile video, but there's a couple of really cool options that you could use for it. We decided to go with Neo Ragnarok, just because we play most oftentimes for these feature matches without a sideboard, so we have a lot of sideboard space available, and Neo Ragnarok can just kind of win the game. So we have that second token that we generated before. So we decide to go say, hey, we are going to try to force a threat to try to pull out something from Paul, thinking that he doesn't have a cancel. But if he does, we've at least forced him to answer the Magic Stone Research Institute, and then we can respond to that answer on this lethal board. Certainly would be lethal if this Institute resolves, to then try to punish with the God's Art of Crossing Point. Crossing Point can do the God's Art even if you do not have 8 expelled chance. It just specifically has the +5/+5 to board and draw power if you have 8 expelled chance. So Replicant Kaguya is going to come down here, try to copy this. We think about maybe if we want to respond to the Rep Kaguya's cast or her enter effect, we are going to choose to respond to the cast. We do not think that Paul has a cancel here. He hasn't drawn. This is probably his only one. If he had another one, he would have probably used it to protect the Replicant Shiva. So Neo Ragnarok's going to get cast here. It does not get canceled, and now we proceed to put out all these giants. Now, I'm not going to put them out all on the screen here because they go by so fast. Most of them aren't going to do anything, especially because he has an eternal body. Surtur here is going to generate 2 moon tokens and burn a resonator for 8, so we'll just have to burn our own thing for 8 because we have to target something, and currently it has barrier. The giant from Game of Gods has to be targeted if able by your opponent. We can try to gain 1,000 life thanks to our giant, or we can just pop our own addition and gain 1,000 life. Schmel comes in, doesn't do anything. Trow ramps us a stone into play tapped, and then we can go ahead and get a 1-drop resonator. Spoiler alert, this deck plays 0 1-drop resonators, so there's nothing to grab. The extra life gain is super huge because we're doing this during our main phase, so we have to survive at least 1 more turn from Paul. Utgard Loki's going to come into play. It's going to force us to destroy a resonator. We are going to choose to destroy Schmel. And the reason why we're doing this is because we actually want the -10/-10 to hit the board because we want that Kaguya to die as soon as she comes into play. We're going to have to lose 400 life, go down to 21. We still don't die to the Welser, to the Robometa there, which is nice. He starts to pick up the Robometa, but it's only getting -10/-10. My side of the board also gets -10/-10 and isn't buffed by the Magic Stone Research Institute right now. So, and then all of those things enter effect. The Kaguya gets to enter and then immediately gets killed. There's another Sand Giant that does nothing. The other Surtur that if it takes damage, it does something. Another Giant that would just have Drain, which is nice. And then Bergelmir can't target anything. It does say you may rest target Resonator, so we'll just target one of our own things and then choose not to rest it. Look at the top 4 cards of our deck. Put them back in any order, send the rest to the graveyard, and then draw a card. Which is also great because we want to send cards from deck to graves, like the ABC Graveyard here. So we're just going to send all 4 cards to the graveyard. We do get Cemetery off of that because it's sent from deck to grave. We get to draw a card. And then all of this happens. Kaguya enters finally. She's going to cancel the Magic Stone Research Institute, but she is immediately going to die because of how the -10/-10 on the board is. And we are now threatening Paul for a bajillion damage. So we're going to expel... We're going to use Interdimensional Graveyard to get rid of the Kaguya, make ourselves a token. We are now at 8 expel chance. Everything's getting +5/+5. Paul can hit us for 16, but we still have 500 life left, and unless he's playing something like the Mysteries of Mylist, he's probably not going to be able to burn us. That being said, Mysteries of Mylist also would have to target the giant. Right now, that is the 3-drop giant, so not even you'd have to have 2. Essentially, and even then he's not at seal 10, so it wouldn't even be able to kill. So he has to be able to kill the giant. Now he could use precision to kill it with Robometa, but ultimately at that point in time it kind of defeats the purpose because then the Mysteries of Mylist burn isn't lethal. Like, there's a lot of things that's currently not working in Paul's favor. We do see him go ahead and play Nicte here to try to see about maybe getting into something. It'll have Belligerence, but again, I have so many blockers that really doesn't do much. Gets to animate a stone and give it Eternal. Calls a stone, hopes to hit a Windstone, unfortunately doesn't. This would be an out. If that had hit a Windstone, he could use Nicte to destroy the giant that has to be targeted. Robometa can swing in the air, and then he could burn me with Mysteries of Mylist. So playing to the out there, but unfortunately whiffing on the Resonance trigger is a little unfortunate. So at that point in time, Paul just looks at the board, looks at his hand, and recognizes that there's nothing he can do, and he is going to scoop it up. Army of Giants does it. Neo Ragnarok coming in clutch. Don't forget to subscribe here as we go to game 2. Click that button down below. Now you can see the power that is sudden Neo Ragnaroks. Paul choosing to go first again here. Giving me the Darkness Energize, I think is a little bit of an interesting choice. I think you would want to have me go second, but I also think for Welser, there's a world where you want to go first, specifically because you want to get to seal 10 as fast as possible, and having stones helps you do that. We do see Kriya come down here. It's going to get to grab some cards. We get to see a number 13 get grabbed, which is great. So we get to, at the end of turn, we're going to go ahead and mill with Garmheld, and then before the crossing point trigger resolves, we actually hit Sigurd, so we are going to burn our coin for Evil Dead to try to cast Sigurd. We're going to take 500 doing so, but we do get Niflheim out and get that engine kind of online. Niflheim is a grave addition, so we can banish the Niflheim immediately before crossing point resolves and mill 5, seeing Neo Ragnarok, which is not something that Paul wants me to see that fast in the game. Having the option to that, especially if I hit Moonwill fast enough, it'd be particularly devastating for him to have to deal with. Swing in for 8 with Sigurd. Chooses to say that's fine. End of the turn, we're going to go ahead and get Niflheim back. Crossing point's going to try to expel a chant. We see a Sword of Progression come down here to draw a card, just to get that cycle online. I have one will open, and as you can see, I have Doubt, which is great. Yggdrasil top tourist destination's going to get to recover us a stone. We're now at Seal 3. If he has another one, he's set up nicely for being able to do Sword of Progression, or for being able to do number 13, because he has to get to Seal 4. We do see a Guardian Dragon come down, so this is going to get us to Seal 4. So now with Yggdrasil on board, his number 13's only cost him 1 will. This will play into big consideration. He is playing a bit risky here, because if I hit a Moonstone, Neo Ragnarok's just going to get cast immediately, and he is going to be dead. Like, there's almost nothing that he can do to come back from it. Now, I do have to be a little bit careful of when I do Neo Ragnarok, because I can't afford to do it when Shiva is still in play, because then I'll lose most of my giants to that, so I got to be careful. But we're going to go ahead and get a... we're going to use Evil Dead using Doubt's ability during Paul's main phase to get it out, and then during the end phase we're going to mill 2, make a token, lose 300 life, draw a card, and we get to send 2 cards, and we hit Cemetery off of those 2 cards, which is huge. At the beginning of our main phase, we're going to go ahead and use Cemetery's ability. We certainly have more Resonators in our graveyard than Paul, and because we have a darkness lit skeleton J/ruler, we can go ahead and send any Resonator we want. I start to pick up the Sigurd, but instead I say, actually, you know what, let's go for Zombie Revengers. That's the better call here. It's going to force Paul to discard a card and banish a Resonator, and it's going to get to swing for 1,000 damage, which is more than the Guardian Dragon is right now. So again, we're trying to put pressure on the board here. So Kriya gets sacrificed, he discards a card, we call a stone. Trying to move to combat, Zombie Revengers is going to swing in. We do see that Moon Source. Like I said, we could just God's Art right now if we wanted. We'll swing in for 1 with the token, and then swing in for another set 9 with Sigurd, because it got Overgrowth. So because the Guardian Dragon gave it Overgrowth thanks to Kriya, so we get to swing in for 10 damage. We're going to make another token here. I think we forget to make another token off of Doubt. I think we forgot to do all of our triggers there, really. Replicant Shiva's going to come in. We're going to try to do Sword of Progression. That's the first one. Reminding Paul that, hey, this is the first Sword of Progression. Don't cast it yet, because we're still just cycling. Knowing he still has a cancel for us, we're still going to go ahead and say pay 2, burn a Sword of Progression, try to get him to cancel something. He does Sword, draws. Again, this is us messing up a little bit again. Sword of Progression shouldn't recover a stone here because it's non-contract. I lose the board, but that's fine. I'm going to get it back thanks to Graveyard. And now the biggest part for me is the Shiva's gone, right? So now my giants are fine to kind of come in. We're going to mill 2. We're going to try Crossing Point, expel a Soul Hunt. We're up to 4 expelled chance, and then we get to go into our turn. Before draw, he's going to go ahead and get rid of the Graveyard. That makes a lot of sense. We would just reanimate Zombie Revengers and get rid of the Shiva immediately. He would be in, again, really bad shape. Killing Stone's going to come down here. We want to figure out exactly when the right time to try to do the God's Art is. We have access to Neo Ragnarok. There's a Shiva. We know he's got a number 13 in hand. So we got to figure out exactly when we're going to try to go in here. Because again, if we can throw out all of the giants again that quickly, there's probably not much you can do, especially since it's already gone. So we're going to reanimate We're going to put a body on board here. I think we do grab back the demonic dead that we milled earlier. A crossing point's going to expel us another chant. And then before draw on his turn, we are going to try the crossing point God's Art on Neo Ragnarok again. We're going to see if this works. He lets the God's Art resolve. The crossing point goes on the chase. We do see a number 13, and a sort of progression will stop it. And even if he didn't, so the sequencing here is that he should technically, we would number 13 the Neo Ragnarok twice, and we'd still get to resolve the sword. But Paul and I both kind of got ahead of ourselves there. But either way, because he had 2 number 13s, Paul wins that exchange, and we are now locked out of the crossing point God's Art. We have used it. We tried it Neo Ragnarok, didn't work out this time, so good job for Paul. We do see Rehones get dropped here as an activate ability during the main phase, but we are about to probably get a lot of stones. I'm fully tapped out. All I have on board is a little handy-dandy Demonic Dead, which is actually going to make everything on his side of the field even bigger when it gets killed with this Shiva. Down comes our first Rehones. That's going to give Overgrowth to everybody. Can call Stone immediately with the Rehones because it doesn't have an enter effect. Going to see us swing into the Demonic Dead, get everyone bigger. All these +1/+1 counters would be really scary next turn when Rehones can start doubling them. Thinks about whether or not he wants to call Stone with the Rehones. Does indeed. Goes up with another Rehones, so everyone's getting even bigger now. 2 counters added onto it. Calls another Stone, thanks to that Rehones have an ability. And then ultimately decides to pay a Guardian Dragon, fully gassing out his entire hand just to ramp into stones. He's now sitting at 8 stones, or 7 stones, I believe. So 7 stones plus 1 puts him at seal 9. We can still expel stuff, mill some cards. And this is why, again, we take advantage of another reason why we also play Sword of Progression in this deck is because we can just play Replicant Shiva to help clear this board and not immediately die. And Paul, unfortunately, is out of cards in hand. Not seeing very many Kriyas here has kind of really backfired. So we get to kill both the Guardian Dragon and both Rehones because we're not targeting, we're choosing. We get a bunch of counters, but it's mainly just so that those Replicant Shivas can bounce off each other. We're going to try to do Doubt. This also makes the Replicant Shiva very bad because if it swings, we can block with Doubt and make Paul take all of the damage. Right now, that Replicant Shiva is swinging for 17. 17. So I don't think Paul wants to take 1700 damage. At the end of the turn, we're going to get a token, lose 3 life, make a Demonic Dead, expel a chant, setting ourselves up for getting that huge pump up. As you can see, we have 7 expelled chants. So on our next turn, with a grip full of cards and a board full of cup bodies, we are going to have this massive +5/+5 bonus. That is the kind of back end element of Crossing Point. We get to the late game and suddenly tokens become huge. We do see a Kriya come down here. And we're going to say, you know what, we're in a good spot. We want you to not have cards. That's your only card for the turn. You're a little bit short. We're going to Sword of Progression that and choose not to bounce anything. Unfortunately, even with Calling Stone, Paul finds himself now at Seal 10, but he cannot Judgment while tapped. So even though he made it to Seal 10, he can't flip and replenish his hand. And so this is pretty much going to be the game here. Doesn't have the ability to cast anything from graveyard. He's already burned his Shiva. We make a second token thanks to Doubt. Both of these tokens are swinging for 6. We now get to draw an extra card for the beginning of turn. Full grip of cards, plenty of will. We could also just flip Garmheld if we need to, but ultimately it's just about having a full grip of cards with nothing for him to use. You see we even have access to Game of Dreams, which is pretty funny. We can just hardcast it, but there's no real reason. We have so many cards in hand. Paul is completely resourced out. It's just a matter of how do we want to execute it, or what direction we want to do it. The problem here is that Paul can't even block, right? If Paul, I mean, Paul's dead on board anyway, but even if he didn't, blocking also seals his fate, because Doubt can then just crash into whatever he's blocked with, like the Shiva, right? Can crash into the Shiva, and then he'll just lose all the life anyway. So even if Doubt's only hitting for 8, hitting the Shiva would actually be hitting for 18. So we're going to go ahead and do Arm of the Demon just to give everybody Drain to replenish our life total a little bit, which is helpful. Decides to block the Demonic Dead. We gain 800 life back, and then we just swing out, and that is the game. So there you guys have it. Thanks to Paul for sitting down with us, and thanks for checking out our Crossing Point Garmheld list. Deck profile for the Crossing Point list will be up later this week. And until next time, this is DMO73 saying class dismissed.